So, first session after lunch, and probably the scariest title of any session here, The Death of Digital. All right, so before anyone panics, let me unwrap a little bit about what I mean by the death of digital and the post-digital age. So, digital is a word that is commonly used, has been commonly used, but if you're paying attention, it's used less commonly than it used to be. And I predict that in the coming years, the word digital will actually fall out of use because it's not needed anymore. As a term that differentiates one thing from another, digital is going to become ubiquitous. Everything will be digital. As our friends at Google of saying, we don't go online, we live online. And so calling something digital is similar to, think back to personal computers. When personal computers first came out, that descriptor, personal, was needed to differentiate computers from mainframes. But when was the last time you were getting ready for work and thought, oh, I better grab my personal computer? All right? It's the same thing with cellular phones. Have you ever heard anyone under 25 say the word cellular, right? I mean, I was thinking back of examples. The only one that came to mind was that Drake song, Hotline Bling. And I argue he only included it because it needed to fit the rhyming scheme. He needed an extra syllable. So, like those words, the word digital is not going to be needed because everything is going to be digital, everything is going to be connected. Nicholas Negroponte said it best over 20 years ago when he said, like air and drinking water, being digital will be noticed only by its absence, not by its presence. And I think this was a very provocative statement at the time, but the world we're living in today, this is 100% true. And this has a lot of implications for how we live our day-to-day lives and how we as advertisers have to make sure we resonate with individuals, that we reach out to them, and that we play in these spaces that they're now claiming as their own. I'm actually going to start at the bottom of this list talking about shifting primary devices. So here's some stats that will not be surprising at all, okay? 95% of adults in America own a mobile phone, or as we say these days, a phone. 77% of them have smartphones. So they're able to go on the internet. That's a device that they can use to search, to use apps, to be social. But here's a stat that did kind of catch me by surprise. 1 in 5 people are smartphone-only internet users. So it's not second screening. It's not additive. It's not moving between devices. When they go online, the only screen they see is that smartphone screen. So just being mobile first isn't good enough anymore for people that are only going to get that experience, not use it as a way to test the waters, and then pivot to their computer to actually do the transaction. They're living and breathing in that mobile-only world. There are further implications from this. One of my favorite cartoons online is XKCD. It's incredibly nerdy. I like this example. Want to go for a walk? Sure, just need to grab my device that feeds me a 24/7 stream of opinions, context-free scary world news, and random emotional stimuli, plus a spare battery. So this constant connectivity and living in the post-digital world hasn't just changed how people use technology, it's changed our lives completely. It's changed our social behaviors, and it's critical to understand this in order to be successful in the future. So BGC did a survey not long ago where they asked a large group of people to choose either or. Either give up your cell phone for a year or give up this. And the results were kind of interesting. So nearly a quarter of people surveyed said they would rather stop seeing their friends in person than give up their phone. Over half of them said they would stop dining out so they could keep their phone. Nearly half said they'd cancel their vacation or that they would give up one of their weekend days, start working 6-day weeks just to get to keep their phone. And finally, nearly a third of people admitted that they would give up sex for a year rather than give up their phone. Now, admittedly, I don't know the survey audience. That might be a false comparison, because that might be the status quo. But regardless, it's important. It's important to understand that our devices are integrated into our lives, integrated into our behaviors, and it's become the norm. And people aren't going to move away from that. And it's not just phones. When you think about the number of connected devices and how they all interact, from laptops to traditional desktop computers, gaming consoles, phones there, tablets, smart speakers, smart dongles to connect to other devices to connect them. People are moving between these spaces and they're living constantly connected, constantly digital, so much so that you don't need the word digital to describe their behavior. So in our time today, I'm going to go through 3 major implications of how these changing behaviors are affecting us as consumers and us as advertisers. And the first thing I want to talk about today is content consumption. So I'm going to go back to this slide. And I'm going to admit this is not just a hypothetical list of devices. This is the list of devices in a very specific household that 3 people live in. A grown woman, a child, and me. All right, 3 people. Now, that's the kind of funny bit, but the other thing I realized after I had put this presentation together is that there is a device that is completely missing from here, not because I wanted to make a point, just because it didn't occur to me to include it. Anyone have a guess what that is? Television, right. I did not put a TV on here, I put the little dongle there for my Chromecast, because that's how I think of consuming content on my TV. I pull it up on my phone, I cast it to the TV, and that's just how I approach it. And so when we're thinking about that, we've got the devices to think about, but we also have the sources for this content and how people are consuming it. So Netflix, I'm going to be talking about Netflix a few times today because they've done some interesting things. A recent survey of millennials found out, they admitted this, it was an anonymous survey, so I guess they could admit it, that 10% of them had dated someone just to get access to their Netflix account. That's how much they're prioritizing this content they want to consume. All right, now, quick exercise. Everybody look to your left, look to your right. Statistically speaking, one of the 3 of those people and you, one of you has binge-watched Netflix at work. I'm not going to make you raise your hands, but and Netflix is a master of using all of this data, not just to reach people across devices, but to do what we as marketers have been talking about and tiptoeing towards for years, which is personalization of content. So this right here are the kind of screen grabs, the trailers for Stranger Things. You might have seen some of these. Chances are you did not see them all, because based on what else you have watched on Netflix, Netflix is going to pick and choose what image to show you for every single piece of content that they have, whether it's an original show or even a movie. They even got caught doing this a while back because I think it was good intention, but maybe not well thought out. They were basing the posters for the movies on people's racial profiles, their gender profiles, based on all of the different things, and in some cases misrepresenting the movies. But this kind of personalization is backed up by data, and they've found that it works. They're taking it a step further with their newest program, Love, Death, and Robots. How many people have watched Love, Death, and Robots? It's awesome. It's like the old heavy metal cartoons, right? It's great. It's an anthology series, meaning that each episode is a separate standalone story, which means it doesn't really matter what order you watch them in, which Netflix realized means they don't have to show them in the same order to everyone. They actually have 4 different orders that they're surfacing this anthology series, and it's, again, based on your previous viewing habits to make sure that the first 2 episodes are the ones most likely to hook you and make you want to watch all 12. Now, this content doesn't just live on Netflix. I have exciting news for everyone here. Believe it or not, you can go on Facebook and watch all 7 seasons of Buffy the Vampire Slayer and all 5 seasons of Angel for free. Like, even season 6, you know, where they went to the WB and their production values went down a little bit. But, so I got an ad for this because I guess I'm in the target demographic. And that's how I discovered it. So I don't even know how many other shows that they're buying up the rights to, that they're moving onto their platform, because Facebook realizes that if they're able to give people content they want to consume on their platform, that keeps people on the Facebook platform. It keeps them coming back, and it keeps their attention from going to other devices, other opportunities to consume content. Now, the big takeaway from this for brands is that people, when they are engaging, whichever device they're engaging with, they're used to consuming rich content. That has become the status quo. Google recently did a survey and found that over half of all mobile brand experiences are image or video based. And when I first saw this survey, I was like, okay, that's pretty good. But the more I thought about it, the more I think this is actually a lousy result. Because when people are consuming content on their smartphone, they're consuming Netflix movies. They're watching Buffy on Facebook, apparently. I have no stats around that, but it must be happening. And so when they're seeing brand experiences, if it is not meeting those expectations of what else they're consuming, the brand is missing out. It feels like a disruption into their media consumption habits. Some of the most successful brands are the ones that have realized this and have really leaned into how we consume media today, how we discover media today. Raise your hand if your house has been taken over by LOL dolls. I have a 9-year-old daughter. When I showed her this presentation, she jumped out of her chair when I got to this slide. She was so excited. So LOL dolls just won a prize at some sort of toy fair as the best, biggest toy of the past year. And what's interesting about them is they have TV commercials. They're doing some traditional advertising, but every one of their TV commercials premieres on YouTube before they start showing it on TV. And in fact, some of those commercials don't even make it to TV. They show it on YouTube, they see what the kids are watching, they see where they're dropping off or skipping to the next video, and they pick and choose which ones that they then want to throw the other advertising dollars behind on TV. And they've got so much more content that never makes it to TV. A lot of it is just people unwrapping the toys. Who knew that that would be something that kids just want to watch hours and hours of, unboxing videos for these goofy, kind of scary looking little toys. But it's not just advertising. People are interacting with content in a bunch of different ways. This is a picture I took of one of my Google Home hubs. We've got a couple of them now. Because my daughter had found a Rubik's Cube and came to me and said, "Hey, Dad, how do you solve a Rubik's Cube?" I don't know how to solve a Rubik's Cube. So I decided to put Google to the test. Let's see if this works. And I went over to the Google Home Hub, and I asked, "How do you solve a Rubik's Cube?" And it pulled up a 40-minute YouTube tutorial video that walks you through exactly how to do it. Just like, boom, didn't have to scroll through anything, didn't have to dig around. And then my daughter plopped down there for 40 minutes, and she was figuring out how to solve a Rubik's Cube based on this question and answer and where we're consuming that media. That's not something that she went and typed a search for. That's not something that she borrowed my phone for. That was her asking a question and getting an answer, and not a list of steps, but a video which she's going to be much more engaged with and learn a lot more from. Even the types of media big companies are putting out is changing and taking into account this new consumer behavior, not just of how people want to consume media, but how they interact with it. How many people watched Black Mirror Bandersnatch? Raise your hands, right? And how many people watched it more than once? Yeah, because you want to make different choices and see how they play out. This is not a new idea, all right? This has been around for a while. Choose Your Own Adventure books. This is my favorite Choose Your Own Adventure book because it has an ending you can't actually get to in the book. It's hidden like an Easter egg. I'll talk to you about it later. It's super nerdy. This is a graph showing all the choices, but interactivity and letting people control their journey through the media is something that has gone from theory to reality, again, because everything is interconnected. And in this post-digital world, you're not just passively consuming media, and you're not even just sharing it with your social network. You're engaging with it when the brand gives you the opportunity to control your own journey. This has changed a lot about how we consume media. Calvin and Hobbes, one of my favorite comics. My daughter was reading through all of them a while back. She came across this one and she didn't get it. So the punchline here is, hey, my TV show's on, I've got to go. And she actually asked me why, because he could just watch it on DVR, right? Like, the concept of appointment viewing has gone away. And in some cases, that's a big change, and that's something that is, I don't know, it's taken me a little while to wrap my head around. We will never have another moment like the MASH finale in 1983. 106 million people tuned into this at the same time, consuming that content, having this communal experiences. It's something that it is a record that was not broken until 2010, the Super Bowl. All right, that record stood for so long. Let's compare that. Game of Thrones season finale last year. You know how many people watched it in real time? 16.5 million, compared to 106 million for the MASH finale back in 1983. So not only are we in control of where we consume media, we're in control of when we consume media, and this has led to large social changes, such as talking about spoilers. Like, spoilers weren't a thing until just a while ago, and now it's something that we have to be cognizant of in our conversations with our friends. It's something that we have to keep in mind, and yeah. This is something that, again, because people are in control of how they consume media, It's very, very different. So the big takeaways from content consumption, it's important to personalize not just the content, but the packaging that it comes in. Both of those pieces have to be personalized based on your data. Enabling consumers to control their own journey, giving them choices, giving them points of interaction is a great way to keep them from wandering off somewhere else. And then finally, when you're measuring, don't just measure how many people saw it, measure how deeply they engaged with it, how long they watched it, where they interacted, because that's the true measure of how successful it was. All right, now let's talk a little bit about community in this post-digital world. So the first thing you need to know is community equals conversation. That is what community is in the world today. Cory Doctorow is a futurist and science fiction author that I really like, and I found this quote, and it'll probably razz a couple of people, but conversation, not content, is king. Content is just something to talk about, all right? So when we think about communities in the past, this is kind of what it looked like. So you got your community bulletin board, and it's a conversation, but it's a very limited conversation, where it's a broadcast and then individual responses that are personal, that are direct, that aren't shared elsewhere. Today in our communities, it's amplified so much more, and there's 3 different ways that it's amplified. We've got our chosen community, people we know, our found community, people that we don't know, and our inherited community, people we may not want to know. So chosen community, I found several examples on Facebook. I've always used TXU Electric. Any recommendations for electricity plans? I'll be in a 4-plex, very specific ask. So the one, I need dinner reservations tomorrow night to celebrate the 10-year anniversary of our first date and Groundhog Day. Tell me about a nice place that will feed a vegetarian without a 5-minute speech about how great bacon is. All right, and then, guys, I don't usually get political on here because I don't want to lose friends, but there's something I have to ask. Where can I find a good mariachi band? All right, Alyssa, where's Alyssa? She's here, yeah. So she recently took a pretty awesome vacation going down to Austria, and before she took that vacation, she reached out to her community asking for recommendations of where she wanted to go. And of course, since I live in Texas, this one showed up too. Don't be sheepish. Like people trying to find sheep. Like going to this community, your chosen community. There's also our found communities, which is people we don't know but we want to get opinions from. A couple of my favorite reviews on Amazon. Zippo lighter fluid delivers what it promises. It's a can of lighter fluid. It's flammable. There's 4 ounces of it. Do you want 4 ounces of flammable lighter fluid? This is the product for you. Or how about this one for uranium ore? I purchased this product 4.47 billion years ago. When I opened it today, it was half empty. If you don't get that, get your data science guys to explain it to you. It's pretty funny. And a half keyboard. I'll let this review speak for itself. So we've got our chosen community, we've got our found communities, but we also have our inherited communities. Best of Next Door is a fantastic site. My husband found a dead parakeet in our driveway this morning. If your parakeet is missing, then stop looking for it. It is not coming home. Or this one, need to rehome a dog. Small terrier, tends to bark a lot. If interested, let me know, and I'll jump over my neighbor's fence and get it for you. Now, as brands, when we're stepping into these communities, right, these are places that people have found or built. It is critical for brands to be respectful when they move into this space. Sprout Social did a survey asking people what behaviors they want from brands on social, which I would argue definitely is a community. And honest, friendly, and helpful were the leaders by a long shot. That's what people are looking for from brands. Everything else fell off pretty quickly. I'm going to show you an example of how not to engage with a community. So Deep Ellum Brewing is a local brewer in Dallas. And they recently opened up a Fort Worth location, the Funky Town Fermatorium. So I'm from Fort Worth. If you're not from Fort Worth, people from Fort Worth like to call it Funky Town. I don't know why. I'm not going to defend that. It's just a thing. So they painted this mural on the side of the building. This is a few blocks from our office, which is in the museum district. They painted this big mural of their logo. And then the city came by and said, that's not within code. That is too big of a logo. And they said, no, it's art. And they said, look, it's your logo. You can't do that. And so they made this post, kind of sad. They had to take it down. And then they put in this little jab, not so funky, which a couple of Fort Worth people took as, the Dallas guys come in here and they build this, and now they're poking at us. And so there were some interesting comments on this thread. This one came up, and I will take the time to read through this. Instead of posting something passively, aggressively bashing the city you've expanded to, maybe, just maybe, you should have looked into the rules and regulations a bit. You can go all over Fort Worth and see gorgeous murals and artwork displayed. So this is someone giving their feedback. It's not great, it's not terrible, it's just feedback. I am now going to let you read how Deep Ellum Funkytown Formatorium responded to this specific comment. So this is how not to engage with a community you are moving into. The original poster then posted this. Then the original poster posted this. Their evangelist is now commenting on my personal page. So the person that ran their social page was going through her old photos and poking at her. And So again, how not to engage in communities in the modern world. Really, it's critical. Remember that all of your employees are ambassadors. So at this point, when the guy went to her personal page and started being snarky about her pictures, even though he was under his personal account, it started from that conversation, and he was still representing the brand. Every employee you have is an ambassador, and training them how to have conversations in person and in communities is critical. Listen thoughtfully, and then amplify good interactions. And I think that's where we miss a lot as brands, because we make these social posts and we see, what kind of comments they get, but taking those and using them and using those to fuel new content, using those to understand how people are responding, identifying new paid search keywords to run. There's a lot we can do there. And again, engage in conversations with honesty. That is what people want from brands, honest and helpful. And then once you've got that, you can add on some funny stuff, some snarky stuff, but always check and make sure that you are being authentic, because if you are not, people will know right away. All right, the last piece I want to talk about today is the post-digital world and how it has affected spaces. So 7.8 million people use Amazon on their mobile phone to compare prices or availability online when they're in an actual store. This is something that isn't an outlier, it isn't a surprise, this is just common behavior. You're looking at something, I could buy it now, or I could get it tomorrow if there's a better price. This is what people do. And this is something that brands have to make sure that they deal with, not only with the strategy, but with an infrastructure to support it. Amazon is leaning into this with their Amazon Go stores that integrate that online and offline experience, not in a way that is interesting, but in a way that adds value and reduces friction. And that is the key takeaway from all of Amazon's brick and mortar experiments. And the reason why some of them have succeeded and some of them have failed, like the pop-up stores. The pop-up stores, Amazon just announced that they're closing their pop-up stores that are promoting their product because it wasn't providing incremental value. People could just order it online. And they had driven enough awareness of their products that they didn't need to put it in front of someone. But something like Amazon Go, where you can go in, you can get what you want, and then you can just walk out, and it'll be credited to your Amazon account, and you pay that way, that adds value. Adds value. Okay, keep count of how many times I say that. It's going to come up a few times. There's another company called Cooler Screens that's doing some really interesting things with spaces. They're partnering with CVS and Walgreens. They're doing some test markets right now, taking the fronts of their coolers for their drinks and turning them into LCD screens that alternate between displaying the product inside with all the information and can also add promotions. They can fill in ads based on individuals' shopping history and observations. This is buyable space. This is additional out of home that is going to be buyable in the very near future. Microsoft and Kroger are working on an even more advanced version that uses digital signage on the shelves. They announced this at CES. I got to take a look at it. It's fascinating because it doesn't just let you swap out prices like, you go to McDonald's and they have the TVs and they can swap out and show animations, but you can actually interact with it. If you are a loyalty member, you can type in the products that you're getting, pick a cute little emoji, and it'll show up when you get to that aisle so you can immediately spot what you're looking for, the specific size that you have picked out in advance. It's integrating, it's adding value to people's relationships with the brands. There's another company that is doing some really fascinating stuff that I saw at CES, Genetech. They're partnering with Microsoft's cognitive services, and what they can do is they can recognize individual faces. It's not tied to PII. They don't know who you are, but they know how many different people came into a store. It connects to your security cameras that already exist, so you just plug this in, and it's using data you're already collecting, but it's using it in a smart way, tracking how many individuals came through your door, how frequently they're coming, where they're standing, where they're moving, again, integrating with an existing system. For an example of how not to do this, think about Target. How many people read about the little snafu Target had with their online and in-store pricing? So it was something that was blown up to be a lot bigger than it actually was. And I personally am of the opinion it was not anything sinister. It was just Target not taking care of their data like they should. But there was a news company that did a sting. They were checking stores' online prices and comparing them to in-store. And they actually discovered something different. They discovered that if you are in the Target app and you're at home, you'll see one price for something. If you go in the store and look at the exact same item, sometimes you'll see a different price, purely based on your geolocation. And sometimes it was higher, sometimes it was lower. That's what makes me think that they weren't trying to jack up online prices and prevent this. It was just poor data management. But it's critical that you provide that seamless, consistent experience from the digital space to the physical space. Now, the one thing that we always have to think about when we're talking about spaces is balancing value and privacy. If you are doing something that even sounds like it might cross the line with privacy, but you're not adding value, not adding tangible, visible value, you need to turn around and take a different approach. I love my Pixel 3 phone. I'm an Android convert. I've been using Google Maps since long before that. Google has logged a long history of where I've been. In fact, I just got my March Google timeline update. Google has tracked my movement over 33 million miles to 126 different cities. That's a lot of information I'm sharing with Google. But I get tangible benefits out of it. When I'm going back to New York and I'm looking at hotels, it pops up and says, you stayed here 3 months ago. And I can think back and go, oh yeah, I did like that place. I'll book there again. When I'm looking at Google Maps and getting traffic, it shows me how busy traffic is. But it's really a trade-off of understanding the data you're sharing, even if you may not realize you're sharing it. This is an image from Google Street View, the street leading up to my house in Fort Worth, Texas. I was looking at it because sometimes it's fun to go to Street View and see how your house has changed, and I noticed something. And then I stepped a little closer. That is my wife and daughter walking home from school, captured by the Google Street View car. And originally I was a little weirded out, but I looked closer and saw that it automatically blurred her face, even though she wasn't turning around. And that made me feel a lot better, and like I didn't have to make some angry phone calls about this, because Google was thoughtful about proactively understanding and building in functionality around that. An example of digital moving into the physical space that's in a tangible, beneficial way, adding value, is this trial that several hospitals are doing where they've added Amazon Echoes to the hospital rooms. So instead of hitting a buzzer and hoping a nurse comes, you can ask how long it's been since you had your pain medication. You can tell someone that you need help, and you don't have to move, you don't have to do anything. You can even change the channels on the TV. That is adding value in a situation that I think a lot of people will embrace. All right, I said I was going to come back to Netflix. Did anyone read Netflix's last quarterly earnings report? I didn't read it either, but I read some headlines that came from it. Does anyone know who Netflix said their biggest competitor was? Not Hulu, not HBO, not YouTube. Netflix believes that their absolute biggest competitor that they have to beat in order to win is Fortnite. My daughter, when I showed her this presentation, she nearly stormed out of the room because she hates Fortnite, because all the boys in her school are obsessed with it, and they do the silly dances, and yeah. But this is something that I find this interesting. Earlier talking about hotel chains and Airbnb, and when Jeremy was talking about how Harry's and Dollar Shave Club disrupted razors, this is Netflix paying attention to what's coming next, to who their challenger is outside of their particular space. And they believe that because in the attention economy, we're trying to win eyeballs, every minute that someone spends playing Fortnite is a minute that they're not watching something on Netflix. And so they are trying to target and build out content that's going to appeal to this. I would say that Black Mirror Bandersnatch is a first step in that direction of making it more interactive and appealing to this type of audience. But what I find interesting about Fortnite is it's not just another video game. They're actually releasing their content in a new way than video games have before. It's not an expansion pack, it's a new season. So when you hear that the new season of Fortnite came out, you want to go and jump in and check out the new season so that you're caught up with it and know all the new goofy dances. I'm not going to do the dances. But it's critical for brands to keep that in mind, that you're not just competing with your competitors, you're competing with every other opportunity that someone can steal eyeballs and thought time away from your brand. This is something that I've dealt with for years playing in bands. This is a picture of my band the first time we played at Billy Bob's, Texas in 2013 for our CD release, and it was exciting. We had a big crowd. Now, being a nerd in the band, I started graphing how many people attended shows and seeing, okay, what was the weather? Was someone else playing across town? Like, how can we make sure our shows are better? And eventually our drummer pointed out that, honestly, I was never going to get the answer because our biggest competitor isn't the other local band that's playing down the street. It's Xbox, it's Netflix, it's the stuff that keeps people on the couch and not coming out to see a show. So when you're talking about spaces, realize that it does cross the physical and digital, and if you just focus on one, you're missing out. Now, always provide value to the consumer in any opportunity that you're building around spaces. Don't just make it kind of cool, make it something that's tangible and adds value. Remember, data privacy is everyone's business, and you have to be proactive about consumer privacy. Again, that Google example is absolutely fantastic because before I wrote that angry email, I saw they had proactively blurred the face. They solved for it. So to wrap up, I'll end on this quote. Like air and drinking water, being digital will be noticed only by its absence, not its presence. So that's a recipe for the near future. You have to be digital, you have to be present wherever people are. However, let's think one step beyond that and go back to the thing that I joked about earlier, adding value. It's not enough just to be there, you have to be adding value every step of the way. At CES, a lot of exciting new products were released. One of them was this refrigerator by Samsung. And the big, aha moment was, it will ping your phone if you leave the door open. Does that add value? The last thing I want is more interruptions, more notifications, more pings of what's going on. No, just do it. Just close the door. Don't tell me what's going on. Just fix it. So I would argue that moving forward, digital absence isn't the risk. Everyone, every brand, every advertiser is going to be present in the digital and post-digital space. That's status quo. What we have to pivot towards is not just being there, but making sure that everything we do, every opportunity we have to connect with a consumer, whether it's a big product launch, an advertising campaign, an app, a website, is always adding value every step of the way. Thank you very much.